Hi! Within this lecture, we're going to see how we can improve our code by introducing some other features and functions as well. So within the previous lecture, we managed to change our MAC address by getting an input from the user. So the user specified an interface and a MAC address, and our software actually changed it. So let me just try it with a different number from this. Okay, so if I hit enter, it will say MAC changer started, and if I do ifconfig, then I will see my MAC address has actually been changed. So within the following lectures, what I want to do is to refactor this code, okay, so that it would work the same, but it would be much better and also professional. So we are now just writing the codes and executing them, but we don't use any functions, for example, and we don't use any tools to actually control if the MAC address has been changed or not. So we were doing this manually throughout the previous lectures, remember? So we run our Python code in here, and then we run ifconfig to see if it actually changed the MAC address or not. But it will be better if we make this in here, right? If we write this as a code and let the software do it for us. We don't have to do it manually every time. So first of all, let me refactor this. So let me put all of the related items in related functions. Then we will implement other things in the following lectures. So we have adding options section in here, tab above, and below we have the subprocess calls. So maybe you can think of a way to group these codes, group these lines, and make it into a function so that we can use these functions whenever we need. Not only in this Python code, but also in the following codes that we're going to build throughout this course. Remember, we can import or just copy and paste the functions into other projects as well. So first of all, I'm going to define a function to change MAC address, okay? So I will call this MAC or change MAC, okay? So def change underscore MAC underscore address. And do we have to give input? Yeah, it would be good to give input of this user interface and user MAC address. So let me just choose everything here and hit tab so that it will be indented. Okay, so let me give two inputs, user interface, okay, and the other input will be user MAC address, so that we can take this in as a input and then give it to the subprocess.call executions here. And of course, we know how to get these inputs from the user, right? We still have these opt parse things up above. And let me just add another function for those lines too. So we are getting user input in here, right? So let me say def get user input. And let me just take all of this and hit tab in order to be just place them under get user input function. Okay, so within this function I'm getting the input of user, then I'm going to make these adjustments as well and pass them to my change MAC address function. So if I get user input in here, then I have to return it, right? So I have to return so that I can cast to a variable later on. So let me just do this. Let me delete this, and rather than assigning to a variable in here, just return it. So if I return this parse object.parse arguments, So when I call this function, it will return me the arguments. Then I can cast this to a variable. Okay, so this won't work right now, so let me delete this. And yeah, my Mac changer started. Let me delete this as well, or just paste it below, okay, so that it won't get in the way. Okay, I think we are pretty clear right now. We have two functions and we can use them. So if I call get user input, what will happen? If I call get user input right here, it will return to me parse object dot parse arguments, right? So within that parse arguments, I can get and supply it to change MAC address function. So what do? I assign these returning parse arguments to a tuple, right? So one is user input, the other one is the arguments, remember? And this is going to be equal to get user input. So this will return to me my tuple. Then I have to call change MAC address, and it will ask me for user interface. And how do we get it? User underscore input dot interface. And how do we get the MAC address? User input dot user MAC address, right? So now I have done the same thing with the previous code, but as you can see, it's a lot neater. So let me save this. So it's much more clear right now, and it's organized into functions. We can use them whenever we want. So let us test this because we made a lot of changes. Let us see if we broke something. So let me change this to 55, for example, okay? And once I hit enter, it will say my Mac changer started. And if I do if config, then I will see it has been really changed. So now, as you can see, it's a lot neater and it's more clear what I'm doing. So once I organize this into functions, then it will be very easy for me to reuse these functions in another project. And I can do this. I can just make this into small just function names to make my code more clear. So let us stop here, and within the next lectures we're going to implement the features that I mentioned before to make our Mac changer more professional.